Thank you for being here. I think we worked for a long time with Muslim progressive values, and in particular with Ani Zonneveld. I think one of the most impressive NGOs in the sense that the way they look to religion, the way they look to, and Ani in particular, look to Islam, and the way you can have a constructive dialogue by starting from inside Quran and then trying to explain what is inside and avoiding that we get really values coming forward or are not progressive. It's very impressive. Yesterday there was Imam Khalfan here in the entrance where there was the possibility for a lot of people just to interact with different imams. Well, one of them also here today, but having said this, I give immediately the floor to Ani, and once again, you are doing an absolutely amazing job. We are looking forward to keep you each Human Rights Council coming here to Geneva, because it's really you add a dimension what is essential for the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Roderick, for those kind remarks. I really appreciate that, and of course, Muslims for Progressive Values is very grateful for the support that we receive from the Dutch mission. You guys are basically our angels. Paul, dankjewel. Sabine, dankjewel. So the purpose of Imam Khalfan is a way for us to bring together scholars of Islam, imams, who are progressive-minded, who use the language of religion for the purpose of empowering and enabling women and girls in Muslim-majority countries and in Muslim communities in the West. We must not forget the Muslim communities in the West because they are suffering, the women and girls in those communities are also suffering from a lot of injustices in the name of Islam. So what we do is we use the progressive interpretation with partnership with scholars of Islam and imams to debunk and to challenge the status quo. And most of the status quo, as we know and as we see in daily lives, is that of suffering of Muslim women and girls. And a vast majority of the issues are on FGM, and there's pamphlets there, information there on the various counterpoints that we offer. So please help yourself to those pamphlets. So what we have here today is, at my end here is Khadija Moalla. She is an international human rights lawyer and consultant, and she will do some of the translations, and she will do the summary for us. To my right is Dr. Mongia Suwaihi. She is a professor of Islam Sharia law at the Zaytuna Institute in Tunisia, which is a very, very prestigious religious Islamic university that basically preceded Al-Azhar University, and which has a historically been a very progressive interpretation of Islam, and it's being resuscitated. And then to my left is Imam Khalfan Bukureli, who is from Burundi. He heads 26 an organization of imams in the northern corridor of Burundi, and they are our partners, our Imam Khalfan partner in Burundi, and they have already rolled out 2 conferences in training fellow imams, youth and women about their rights. And still to be seated is Dr. Usama Hasan from the UK, and he'll be speaking on overall issues of women's rights and FGM, both in the UK and globally. So we have a decent crowd here. What I wanted to know, the intention here was a workshop. Therefore, we were going to break into 3 different groups based on early access and educational access to girls. Bukureli, he's going to be speaking in French. Mongia is going to be speaking in Arabic or in French, and she is going to be addressing early and forced marriage. And Usama, like I said, is going to be talking about FGM and just general in English. So we wanted to break it into groups because we want you to really dig into the issues and to ask really in-depth questions, because we want it to be interactive that way. So the question is that what you would like, or would you prefer the typical plenary setting where you're seated and you do not want to move? What is is your choice. What would you like to do? Yeah, go ahead. Give me. Would you like to just sit and then ask all the questions to all the panelists like we usually do? Is that what you prefer? Yes? No? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a small group is better. Okay, so we'll just stick to that. So each presenter will have 10 minutes, and then we'll break out into the Q&A that you can address the panelists, and then we'll do a summary. So with that, let's proceed. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Oh, yes,
Our first speaker is Mongia Suwaihi, and she'll be speaking in French. I know there's a few English speakers here, so Khadija will be doing the English translation. Yeah.
Bonjour. Good morning. Le mariage forcé en islam. Le mariage forcé sont-ils une tradition musulmane?
So the first question that Mongia is asking is about early and forced marriage. Is it really in Islam?
Le mariage en islam égale l'amour. Le mariage en islam, c'est la jouissance. Le mariage en islam, c'est l'affection. L'islam refuse le mariage forcé.
So in Islam, in the tradition, marriage is about love, is about pleasure, is about affection, and there is absolutely no forced marriage or early marriage in Islam, and this is what Prophet Muhammad also, she's going to demonstrate that he refuses also that. This is the outline of our presentation.
Les mariages forcés sont-ils une tradition musulmane? L'islam est une religion qui est basée sur deux sources authentiques, le Coran et la Sunna, c'est les paroles du prophète. Lorsqu'on parle d'islam, on se base sur les deux sources précises. C'est la raison pour laquelle il est incorrect de critiquer l'islam sur les simples mauvais agissements d'un musulman. Certaines personnes, volontairement ou non, y ont introduit différentes pratiques, parfois tirées de telle ou telle tradition, de tel ou tel pays, etc., comme le mariage forcé.
So first of all, Islam has two sources, main sources, the Quran, the Holy Text, and the Sunnah. And when we speak about Islam, we have to use these two sources only, and it's really, really wrong to think that one Muslim person who do something wrong would be associated to Islam or would be claiming that he or she is speaking on the name of Islam. So certain people, voluntary or not, sometimes would use certain things in certain countries, but this does not that they would represent Islam or what these two sources are telling us.
Le Coran a posé le régime convenable qui garantit la souveraineté de l'être humain, protège son honneur et préserve sa dignité en faisant du rapport entre l'homme et la femme un rapport précieux basé sur le consentement de l'homme et de la femme, sur l'offre et l'acceptation comme deux aspects de ce consentement, et le mariage forcé ne respecte pas ces valeurs.
The Holy Text, the Quran, really states that guarantees the sovereignty of a human being and protects its honor and preserves its dignity. And really, for Islam, it's extremely important to base the relationship between men and women on the mutual consent and on the offer and acceptance of both of the marriage.
La liberté et la dignité ont été deux grands droits de la femme acquis grâce à l'événement de l'islam, incluant le droit essentiel de choisir son époux, contrairement à la période pré-islamique, où la fille se vendait comme une marchandise.
So the freedom to choose and the dignity of people and the rights of women's rights impose and include also the right, essential right to choose its spouse. And this in opposition to the pre-Islamic period. This is what Islam brought, because before that they used to sell and buy women. So when Islam came, he brought this new idea of mutual consent when it comes to marriage.
Par définition, un mariage forcé est un mariage où la femme et l'homme n'ont pas de consentement.
So, per definition, a forced marriage is a marriage where there is no consent from the man and the woman, and where there is a lack of freedom. And of course, according to Islamic law, to the Sharia law, this is not the marriage as it should be.
Allah dit qu'il est de ces signes d'avoir créé de vous des épouses pour que vous reposez près d'elles, et il a assigné entre vous amour et miséricorde. Voilà bien là des signes vraiment pour les gens qui réfléchissent.
And there is this Surah 30 and verses 21 of the Quran, what it says in the Quran, in the holy text, that God created both your spouses so that you can be with them, and he gives the sign that he requested love and blessing, and these are the signs that people should reflect on that.
Donc, le but du mariage, c'est le bonheur du couple. Est-ce qu'il y a du bonheur du couple dans le mariage forcé, des petites filles surtout?
So, in fact, the main aim of marriage is really happiness. So can we imagine any happiness between two people who didn't consent, or a woman, and especially for early marriage, can we imagine that a girl could give her consent or live happily having been forced into that early and forced marriage?
Il y a une parole qui dit « La vie est pleine de jouissance, et la femme pieuse est la meilleure jouissance ». Est-ce qu'une femme forcée peut être une jouissance pour son mari, pour sa famille?
So there is somebody called Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As who said that life is full of pleasure, and a woman should give that pleasure. And the question is here, is a forced woman able to give any type of pleasure to her husband if she is forced to do that?
Le Coran dit, parmi ces signes, il a créé de vous pour vous les linéaires. Le mariage est la meilleure façon pour enfanter, multiplier la descendance et continuer la vie en gardant la généalogie que l'islam accorde à un intérêt. Le prophète dit, mariez-vous avec celle qui est affectueuse et féconde, car je vais surpasser en vous le nombre des autres communautés le jour de la résurrection. Est-ce qu'un mariage forcé peut donner ces résultats?
Of course, in Islam, also one of the aim of marriage is to have kids and to be able to have all of this. And Prophet Muhammad also, there is a hadith that said that get married, choose women who are affectionate and also are able to have kids, because I want to have a big community, a huge one when the resurrection will happen, to have a big Muslim community.
Nous avons vu que le mariage en islam est établi sur le consentement sans équivoque, le respect mutuel et l'amour sincère aboutissent à la bonté, l'affection et la compassion réciproque pour unir solidement l'homme et à la femme. Le Coran l'indique clairement. Parmi ces signes, il a créé de vous, pour vous, des épouses, pour que vous viviez en tranquillité avec celles, et il a mis entre vous de l'affection et de la bonté.
So through all the examples we've been talking about, we have been able to explain clearly with absolutely no doubt that really marriage is based on mutual respect, on love, on sincere love, and all of that, and affection and compassion, and all of this would allow that. And there is the Surah 30 which confirmed that.
Le prophète Mohammed a refusé tant de fois le mariage forcé. We
have many examples that prove that Prophet Muhammad refused many times forced marriage.
Aussi, les ulama comme Ibn Taymiyyah, et j'ai choisi Ibn Taymiyyah parce qu'ils disent qu'il est fanatique, et Al-Uthaymin ont refusé le mariage forcé et le mariage des petites filles.
So even Ibn Taymiyyah and Al-Uthaymin, which are known to be kind of radical or promoting a radical Islam, even them were against forced marriage.
Dans des traditions aussi, on trouve des pères qui obligent leurs fils à se marier des filles qui n'aiment pas. Ça n'existe pas aussi dans l'islam.
We have also example of fathers forcing even their sons to get married to girls or women they don't like, they don't choose.
Que faire donc? Apporter des correctifs aux livres islamiques publiés dans tous les pays islamiques occidentaux qui contiennent toutes ces doctrines inadmissibles.
So what we need to do is really to correct all the books, Muslim books that have been published, whether in Muslim countries or even in Western countries, to make sure that all these ideas or doctrine or whatever ideology that is unacceptable should be removed from all those sources of the books you have access to.
Rassembler les forces, ONG, experts, parlementaires, gouvernements, etc. pour lutter,
So we need to bring together in a network, civil society, expert, parliamentarian, all stakeholders together to be able really to come together towards working together against early and forced marriage.
Merci. Attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mongia. Are we all French speakers in here? No? Okay. All right. The next speaker is Imam Khalfan Eli, and he is also a French speaker. Khadija, to us
If there is any volunteer, I cannot claim I'm specialized in religion tradition, but anyways. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, moi je suis francophone et c'est la raison pour laquelle je vais présenter mon exposé en français parce que le Burundi c'est un pays francophone.
So Burundi being a francophone country, I will present also in French.
Bon. En matière de l'éducation de la femme, le Coran et les enseignements des prophètes s'attellent longuement à décourager les pratiques injustes envers la femme.
So, when it comes to education, women's education, Quran and all what Prophet Muhammad taught us really are discouraging or are against the fact that we have any practices, unjust practices against women.
Malheureusement, certains textes mal compris ou détournés de leur vrai sens prêtent confusion et donnent la subsistance aux courants radicaux.
Unfortunately, I still need the text, please. Unfortunately,
go back.
Usama, can I have the previous slide? No, the previous slide, if I can have it. Sorry. Okay, unfortunately, certain texts that are not, there is a problem of understanding or misinterpretation of certain holy texts that really would confuse people or give really the wrong interpretation of why the text has been there or whatever meaning. Yeah.
Les courants radicaux en question sont comme les talibans, Boko Haram, l'État islamique, sans oublier aussi certains dignitaires religieux, comme le dit Cheikh Abdelaziz Ibn Baz, qu'il y a des loups parmi les hommes qui interprètent mal l'islam.
So among the people who are responsible of this misinterpretation of Quran are radical groups such as the Taliban, the Boko Haram, the ISIS or Daesh. And we shouldn't forget also certain religious leaders like Sheikh Abdelaziz Ibn Baz. So we know that these are these people who give a wrong interpretation of the holy text.
Dans un hadith authentique rapporté par Al-Bukhari et Muslim, le prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam a dit: c'est lui qui a eu la responsabilité d'élever des filles et qui a agi bien envers elles, alors que ces filles seront pour lui un bouclier, le protégeant du feu de l'enfer.
There is a hadith or a saying from Al-Bukhari, which is also a source of the source of hadith of Prophet Muhammad, that says that anybody who had one day the responsibility of taking care of girls, whether he is or not, and he has been good in bringing them and they will be those girls his protection against the fire of hell.
L'islam ordonne à ses adeptes la quête du savoir, comme on le trouve dans le Coran, chapitre 58, verset 12, où Dieu dit: Dieu élevera en degré ceux d'entre vous qui ont cru et qui ont réussi la science, car alors il est instruit de ce que vous faites.
So this is now one other verses 58, where really God would say that the people would have a higher standard, those who received science, because really the Quran sees in a very, very high place those who seek the science.
En plus de cela, pour démontrer et soutenir la recherche des connaissances et pour tout le monde, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dit dans le premier verset du Coran, chapitre 96, où il a ordonné à tout musulman de lire. Le premier verset dit « lis ». C'est un nombre de hadiths qui recommande aux musulmans la recherche de la connaissance, comme le hadith du prophète qui dit « Celui à qui Dieu veut du bien, il fait acquérir la science dans la religion. La science ne s'obtient que par l'étude. »
So it's very important to point out that the first verse of the Quran, the first one was just one word, read, meaning seek science. So here, as well as many of Prophet Muhammad hadith, really call on people to learn, to acquire all the knowledge that is possible, the science and everything. And obviously, this obligation goes for men and women. It was never said that it's only men who should seek science, but both men and women.
L'islam ne fait pas de distinction entre les hommes et les femmes en matière de droit à l'éducation.
Islam that didn't distinguish between men and women when it comes to right to education.
Dans les textes sacrés, un accent particulier a été mis sur le droit de la femme à accéder au savoir car l'on a discriminé, comme nous le voyons dans un hadith authentique rapporté par un musulman, n'empêchez pas les servantes, je souligne les servantes de Dieu, de pénétrer dans les mosquées.
So, and it's even many hadith point out the fact that women have that right, and especially a hadith that said, do not forbid women to enter mosques, meaning to enter a place where they could learn.
Ceci, dans le cadre du temps du prophète Mohammed, la mosquée jouait également le rôle de l'école à ce temps-là.
Because mosques were also like schools, they were playing these two roles.
Abu Burda rapporte d'après son père que le prophète a dit « Tout homme qui, ayant une fille esclave, l'instruit, lui donne une bonne instruction, l'éduque et lui donne une bonne éducation, puis la franchit et l'épousant aura une double récompense. » Rapporté par Al-Bukhari.
There is also Bukhari which says that anybody who used to have a girl which is a slave, if he gives her education and a good education, and then she's not a slave anymore, take her out and then get married to her, will have a double compensation.
Là-bas, vous verrez que si une telle récompense a été donnée lorsqu'on élève une femme esclave, quand on aura dire la récompense est pour ta propre fille.
And of course it goes without saying that the same applies when it's your own daughter, that she's not a slave. It's the same thing.
Dans un autre hadith, le prophète dit, celui qui éduque ses filles jusqu'à ce qu'elles atteignent l'âge de la puberté, lui et moi serons ressuscités le jour de la résurrection de cette façon. Il a montré cela avec le doigt, il a pris l'index et le majeur. Oui.
Okay. So again, Prophet Muhammad says that anybody who would give education to his daughter till puberty, both of them, him and myself, and he said the two of us will be resuscitated.
Maintenant, du point de vue des extrémistes, il n'existe aucun verset ni hadith qui interdit la fille musulmane d'aller à l'école.
So now we want to see what the radicalist or the fundamentalist would say according to that. So he's saying that there is no verse, not one hadith, is saying Prophet Muhammad that forbid women or girls to go to school.
Le Coran, les extrémistes brandissent les versets relatifs au port du voile qui se trouvent dans le chapitre 33, verset 59, qui dit au prophète, dit à tes épouses et à tes filles, aux femmes des croyants, de ramener sur elles les grands voiles, et ils seront plus vite reconnus, éviteront d'être offensés. Allah est pardonné les miséricordieux. Ou bien tout simplement, il scande le hadith qu'on trouve, le verset qu'on trouve dans le chapitre 33, verset 33. Restez dans vos foyers, ne vous exhibez pas à la manière d'avant l'islam ou jahiliya et tout consort, pour empêcher la fille musulmane d'aller à l'école.
So certain radicalist or fundamentalist extremist group would use the veil surat or would use a hadith another surah that would say that that would encourage men to leave their women wives at home. Just use it to say it's against the right of women to get education, to go outside or go to school. They would use that.
Maintenant, quels sont les défis de l'éducation de la fille musulmane? Premièrement, ce qui l'empêche, ce sont des grossesses non désirées, les mariages précoces et forcés, comme on l'a dit, les fatwas des savants qui interdisent de mettre les enfants chez les koufars, comme ils le disent, les parents qui n'aiment pas que leurs filles ne peuvent pas passer sur avec les non-musulmans par crainte de devenir comme eux, les raisons religieuses évoquées par le musulman radical qui disait que le système de l'UNESCO est incompatible avec l'islam et ses valeurs.
So many of those fundamentalist groups would really argue that against the right to education, the fact that these girls might become pregnant, that marriage forced and early marriage, the fact that they might be learning from non-Muslim, meaning you don't guarantee if the teacher is a Muslim or not, and also that these girls, it's not good that they would spend 6 hours a day, again with non-Muslim, because they might get converted into another religion. And of course they say that the system of UNESCO, I don't know why UNESCO, especially not the United Nations, but it's another story, is incompatible of the value of Islam. There is an incompatibility with UNESCO.
Bon. L'accès à l'éducation a été aussi, les lois internationales ont dit quelque chose parce que l'éducation comme le droit de l'homme, ça signifie que le droit à l'éducation est également garanti pour tous et sans aucune discrimination. Les États ont l'obligation de protéger, respecter et mettre en œuvre le droit à l'éducation. Il existe des moyens, pour faire en sorte de tenir les États responsables de violations ou privations concernant le droit à l'éducation et tout consort, mais aussi les droits internationaux de l'homme qui garantissent le droit à l'éducation, comme la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme de 1948, ou bien tout simplement le pacte international relatif aux droits de l'homme. Tout cela, c'est pour montrer que le droit à l'éducation est un droit pour tous.
He is citing all the international conventions and the international law that would guarantee the right to education according to all the declaration of human rights declaration.
Merci.
We will share the PowerPoints if you like. Please, you can share your email with Shafran Zonneveld. Shafran, can you put your hand up so that you can pass your emails to her, and we'll be more than happy to share it with you. Our last presenter is Sheikh and Dr. Usama Hasan. He is from Quilliam. This is going to be in English.
Okay, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some general issues to do with Islam and gender equality, some of the basic arguments in philosophy around these issues, and touch on some of the other issues related to women's rights in Islam, which are often discussed. I'm based at the Quilliam Foundation in London. Right, so the first point to make is that this is a general point. Many of my colleagues quoted verses from the Quran, Hadith, etc. And of course, people often object that there are some verses which look very good, and Hadith, and other verses which don't look so good, Hadith. So how do we deal with this? Now, this is the firm argument of all of the reformers and progressive Muslims that are known, millions of them around the world, right? That there are incredible verses like this, totally gender equal, actually quite unprecedented. If you think about the 7th century Arabia, where these were revealed. There is a strong spirit of absolute equality for all humanity in the Quran, including for women, for example, there. Another verse here. Right, indeed, they're fully gender equal. Here's another one. In fact, that is, for all of humanity, a very universal verse which Muslims often quote. There is a hadith, a teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, which the Moroccan women, when they were struggling for gender equality, they displayed on huge banners in their marches and rallies, right? Women are equal partners of men, right? However, we have some traditional teachings now, which have developed over the centuries, which we often find in Muslim communities and Muslim majority countries. For example, forcing women to stay at home, or needing husband's permission to come out to leave the home, for example, or have a career or work, must cover top to toe in public at all times, for example. Inheritance and witness being half that of men, right? Can't marry or travel without a male's permission. And then, of course, some countries even uphold this last idea of domestic violence, if you like, or like beating, as they call it. Now, those also are based on certain verses in the Quran and Hadith. So what's going on? What all the great Muslim jurists and theologians of today, in fact going back many centuries, refer to something called the theory of maqasid, which is the theory of universal objectives, universal values of Islam, or Islamic law and ethics, the Sharia. This started with Ghazali in the 12th century, who said there were 5 basic values which Islamic law and ethics, the Sharia, is based on. It's the preservation and promotion of faith, life, intellect, property, and family. Interestingly, John Locke repeated those same 5 6 centuries later. And there is some evidence that he had actually read translations of the Islamic texts. But anyway, Ghazali was there 6 centuries before our man in England, John Locke. Now you have the latest scholars, like Izzuddin bin Abd Salam of Egypt, the paragraph in the middle, where he's basically saying Islam, the Sharia, Islamic law and ethics, is all about goodness and welfare and avoiding harm and mischief. And this is an absolutely fundamental principle of Sharia. Ibn Taymiyyah has already been mentioned, who is misused often by the extremists of today, and did actually have some rather harsh viewpoints on many things, but his general philosophy was actually quite enlightened, far more enlightened than the extremists who invoke his name today. And he added many other values, universal values, to this overarching theory of the Sharia. For example, honesty, fulfillment of contracts, neighborliness in a human society, living together, moral purity, etc., trustworthiness. This is a classic quote from his student, Ibn Qayyim of Damascus. Again, you look at the dates, this is 14th century, this is also 14th century. Ibn Qayyim said, Sharia, or Islamic law and ethics, is about wisdom, justice, mercy, and goodness. And he said anything at all that replaces these with the opposite has nothing to do with the Sharia, even if it's based on certain interpretations of the religious text. So he said if something is unjust, unmerciful or harsh, is stupid or foolish, and unwise, or it's basically bad or harmful and goes against goodness, then it's got nothing to do with Islam or with Sharia, which are all opposite to that. Over the last couple of centuries, more thinkers, including Ibn Ashur, the 20th century Quran scholar of the Zaytuna in Tunis, where Professor Mongia teaches, added to this whole theory of universal values. They talked about fundamental rights and liberties, freedom of expression, freedom of belief, freedom of religion, etc. Promotion of gender equality, and scientific research and others are there. But abolition of slavery, promotion of gender equality, you will see as a universal value. Now this is why we are left with this following argument, which Karen Armstrong understood when she argued that the Prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a great feminist. So according to this reading, which as I said, all of the kind of reformer Muslims promote all over the world, the rules about women given by God and His Messenger should be seen as the beginning of a process of liberation of women, not as a fixed endpoint. Gamal al-Banna of Egypt, who died a few years ago, promoted this idea. Fatima al-Nisi, who died last year in Morocco, also promoted this. Gamal al-Banna is ironically the younger brother of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. But their argument is basically this, that from our 21st century viewpoint, or from the 20th century viewpoint even, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, if we look at some of these traditional teachings about women in Muslim majority communities and countries, they look way behind. But they're saying if you compare that to 7th century Arabia, when these were revealed, those were absolutely revolutionary. So the Prophet Muhammad gave women the right to choose their marriage partner for the first time. He gave them the right to own their property independently in the 7th century. In Britain, where I'm from, we had to wait till the 19th century for that. 1885, the Married Women's Property Act in Britain brought in, just over 120 years ago, women being allowed to keep their own property. the inheritance. Women were being inherited before Islam, and they had no inheritance at all. All the inheritance went to the sons. Women were treated worse than second-class citizens. So to give them a place in the courtroom as a witness, or to give them some inheritance, and to introduce that into a strongly male-dominated patriarchal society, was actually an absolute revolution. And that's why the Prophet was a great feminist. And we should look at the process that he set in motion of women's liberation. And therefore, to follow the Prophet Muhammad is not to stick to the rules as they were in 7th century Arabia, but to continue that process, which means full women's liberation and gender equality. That is the basic argument around women's inheritance. So, for example, the issue of whether women get half the shares or no shares or whatever under Islamic law, there is this argument that women deserve equality, full equality, gender equality, including inheritance, witness, their role in the public and private sphere, etc. Ani, how much time do you have left?
You're good, I think, at 4. No, 3.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Right, and there are other examples of this. So if people argue, well, this is a strange reading of the Quran and the scripture, it actually isn't. There are many other examples. Another one is slavery. Or just like the Bible, the Quran doesn't explicitly prohibit slavery, but it promotes human compassion. It promotes the fact that slaves are human beings, equal. The Prophet referred to your slaves as your brothers, right? And left that as the last legacy. Look after your slave. And the Quran includes constant recommendations to free the slaves and treat them well, for example, which is why there was a process of the abolition of slavery within Islam. There's a very good book by William Gervais Smith entitled that, The Abolition of Slavery Within Islam. And there are many other examples. Of course, this is a disputed issue today. So, for example, a traditional sheikh, a Sufi English sheikh, like Charles Eaton, he mentioned in his book there are 3 basic differences, he said, the traditional viewpoint between men and women, why he didn't accept full gender equality. However, he conceded that number 2, one of his 3 points, was not absolute. And actually the other 2 are also not absolute. You can very easily argue that there are no absolute differences in Islamic law between men and women. It is all about tradition, culture, interpretation, and limitations of society. Now, of course, there's a list of many women leaders throughout history. These are those in the Quran and in the time of the Prophet. There are many others throughout history who are huge role models for Muslim women. And that is that basic idea of gender equality. There are some names here we should add. We should add Ani and Dr. Mongia and Khadija and others to this list, but this was a partial list I came up with earlier. A couple of case studies I'll finish with. The first one is the new Mudawwana reform in Morocco in 2004. This was a culmination of a 10-year campaign. Many of you will be familiar with this. It was led by some Muslim women scholars and theologians. I met a couple of them, female scholars who promoted this, and they managed to reform a 12 centuries old Mudawwana code, which had been dominant in Morocco since the 8th century. And they finally gave women far more rights. They restricted polygamy severely, etc. Perhaps there's more to be done. They didn't go all the way, but it was a major step forward. And here's another case study. This is a group I've worked with, Ani has worked with, I know, and others. Khadija Moalla is a global movement for full equality between men and women. And there you see some of their activists and scholars. Some of those people on that photo are theologians, both men and women. So this is the kind of work that we also promote at Quilliam in partnership with NPV, and we're very grateful to the UN and the Kingdom of the Netherlands for supporting our work, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Usama. So what we're going to do then, we're just going to open the floor to questions. You can ask any of the panelists whatever questions you have, particularly on the subject matters that we addressed. But actually, I would like to start one first, if I may, and that is on the issue of inheritance. Usama, there is a lot of debate in Morocco right now on the inheritance for women and how it's a healthy one, and that it's revisiting and increasing women's inheritance, the right for women to inherit equal to men. The debate is how many percent. Now, the Quran is specific in a percentage depending on how many siblings the woman has and so on and so forth. Given that in Morocco, 20% of women are the sole breadwinners in Morocco, and given that the context of the Quran is based on women being taken care of by their husband, the social context is completely changed. How should we move forward in the issue of inheritance? What is, Usama, what is your thoughts on it? I'd like to get Dr. Mongia's thoughts on that as well.
Okay, thank you. So if I may first, very quickly, so that's a good example because certain verses of the Quran, say, which in most of the ratios, the woman gets half of the equivalent man. That's the text of the Quran. At the moment in the Muslim world, there's a huge debate as to whether you stick literally to that verse, to that text for all time, or whether you look at the spirit behind it, which is one of equality and increasing women's liberation and what is just for that society. So, in my view, those interpretations are valid, but we have to look at the social context as well, as Ani indicated, and it is about equality. So that there is a strong argument for full gender equality there. Or if women are the breadwinners, because that verse was revealed about a male-dominated patriarchal society, if the reverse is the case, and that was based on a male breadwinner, the husband being the breadwinner, if the reverse is the case, as it is true in many Arab countries, that many households now have female breadwinners, then actually reformers would argue that all of those old rules of the Sharia have to be revamped and rethought, because the role of the intellect is crucial in Islamic law. The Quran venerates the intellect, which is sacred. You saw the universal values, which I detailed earlier, which all of the greatest theologians for the last 1,000 years have promoted. And on the basis of that, you come up with a set of reasonable, rational principles, the universal values of the Sharia. And in the light of that, Muslim societies are free to adjust those rulings around family law. The only underlying principle is justice and compassion. There's going to be equality, equity, justice, and also compassion and mercy. That's my understanding of this issue.
So regarding the inheritance issue and following what just Sheikh Usama was saying, equality in inheritance is also now debated publicly in Tunisia also.
أولاً لأن دستور تونس فيه فصل ينادي بالمساواة التامة بين الجنسين.
Because we do have in our new constitution, 2014, one article that says really it's completely equality between men and women. We have a gender parity 50-50% in the constitution.
كذلك تونس وافقت على كل بنود سيداو.
Tunisia also ratified every single article in CEDAW with no reservation. I mean, they removed the reservation.
كما أن المرأة في تونس تشتغل وتساهم في الإنفاق في البيت.
Also, women in Tunisia do work and do participate 50%, if not more, in all household expenses.
إذا عدنا إلى الإسلام المرأة لم تكن ترث بل كانت تورث.
So if you come back to Islam, of course, before Islam, women didn't have the right to inherit. Worse, they were inherited as object.
الإسلام أعطاها للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين.
So Islam already was progressive in terms of giving her two parts to the men and one to the woman.
في 4 حالات ميراث فقط.
So in 4 cases about inheritance,
في 10 حالات المرأة ترث أكثر من الرجل.
in 10 cases, even women inherit more than men, because there are extremely many cases. So in 10 of them, she inherits more than men.
في 10 حالات أخرى ترث بالمساواة مع الرجل.
In another 10 cases, she inherits equally like men.
المشكل المطروح في العالم العربي اليوم.
So the problem now issue in the Muslim world,
المرأة لا يعطونها هذا النصيب للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين.
she's not even getting what Islam is giving her, this, the fact that 2 parts and 1. She's not even getting that.
وخاصة العقارات.
Especially when it comes to like houses or things like
يأخذها
that.
الرجال.
It's always men who gets the family home.
وهناك عادات في الأرياف.
And there are even tradition in rural areas
المرأة لا تطالب بميراثها من أخيها أو عمها أو غير ذلك.
where women shy away from requesting or from their brother or even uncle her share in the inheritance.
وبالتالي علينا أن نعمل لتتحصل على هذا النصيب.
So at least let's start by making sure that women get what is already in the text.
وبعد ذلك ندخل في التطوير.
And after that, of course, we develop that into equality.
هناك حلول أخرى تطبقها بعض العائلات في تونس.
So there are other solutions that families in Tunisia choose.
تقسم الميراث عند حياة الأب، يقسم الميراث بالمساواة بين أبنائه وبناته.
Is that before he dies, already the father divide all what he owns equally between his sons and daughters to avoid anything later on.
والنقاش ما زال متواصل. هناك من يرفض المساس بآية الذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين.
But we do have groups in Tunisia who are forbidding or stopping anybody to even discuss that verse on inheritance in Islam.
هناك فريق آخر ينادي بالمساواة التامة.
And there is another group who is now asking for pure equality, complete equality between men and women.
والنقاش متواصل.
And this debate is still on.
There is a question there in the back.
My name is Sholezani. I'm from Current Equals Quality, an Austrian NGO, but I have been born in Iran and grown up in Iran. I don't know if you want to translate that, or shall I go further with my questions? So just tell me when I have to stop.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. I have actually 3 questions from all of the speakers. From Mr. Hasan, who was talking about radicalism and so on. I mean, Iranian government and system is not known as a kind of radical group or so. But then, for example, in Iran, the thing that happened very naturally today, early in the morning, when Mrs. Suwaihi shook hands with Mr. Van Schreven, is punished with 99 flogging lashes, you know, and this is lawful, goes through the court. It is not known as a kind of radical, but then the laws of Sharia and laws of Islam comes to the laws of the society, then it might make a lot of damages, because there are lots of different interpretations from Islam, you know. Don't you think that it is very important that governments, the law institutions in Islamic countries just go through separation of laws of Islam and laws of society? Wouldn't be much better in that issue? I have a question from Mrs. Suwaihi. It was on early child marriages. It is so that we have talked a lot about forced marriages, which is forbidden in Islam. But then the law in Iran is right now, it's an Islamic republic. So the children are allowed to even be married under 9 years old if a court decides that they are big enough to go through a marriage. But the law is 13 years old, so that means that a 14-year-old can be married. And then, you know, in Iran, I don't know how it is in Tunisia or Morocco, but in Iran, if you just begin speaking with a little girl, you will go and make up, wear nice dresses in your marriage, a white dress, and then you will have it very nice in your wedding and so on, then you can push them to marry. So the thing that we go on early child marriage is that the children under 18 are children. They can decide really good.
Okay.
And
Can you wrap it up, please? The third question, please.
Mr. Bukoro, it goes under going to school for children. It is so that not only the whole thing that the girl children are not allowed to go to school is prohibiting them to go to school, but there are chains of laws and tradition that goes together and stop children, girl children, to go to school before 18 years old, so that it's not that they are not allowed to go there. For example, in Iran, I know that very properly, that girl children are getting out of school because there are not enough, for example, schools for girls in rural areas. Or if they are stopped going to school because there are not enough resources. In poor families, they have to decide between boys and girls. They decide for boys to go and further get their studies. Thank you very much.
Sama?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In my view, based on what I explained of the Sharia, in Islamic history, there was never a distinction between civil and religious, but actually a very strong civil society emerged out of religion. Because, for example, ideas of public welfare, public goodness, justice are actually religious principles, and the same happened in the West with Christianity and Judaism. Actually, helped in the formulation of those kinds of ideas. So, in one sense, I agree that you separate religion and state. Quilliam advocates that kind of secularism, certainly. But on the other hand, we don't just kind of ditch religion, if you like. What I believe, we must reform religious thinking and continue the process of adaptation, modernization, which effectively means that the religious law supports civil law, which is based on equality and justice, because that is the fundamental principle of Sharia, is justice and compassion. Just as it is in Western codes of law. So I hope that helps. But certainly there are many Muslim-majority countries which have very oppressive and archaic laws and rules about women, and groups like Women Living Under Muslim Laws and others, of course, advocate reform and changes. And I gave an example earlier, Morocco, but it took 10 years, right, for the new Mudawwana reforms, 2004. But that rolled back part of the code which had been there for 12 centuries. It needs hard work and advocacy and campaigning.
بالنسبة لتونس احنا ليس عندنا زواج الصغيرات.
So in Tunisia we don't have early marriage.
بالقانون
Legally it has to be 18 years.
أقل يعني الزواج 18 سنة بالنسبة للولد والبنت بالقانون.
So 18 for girls and boys legally.
فيما يخص الزواج 9 سنوات أو 12 سنة أو
For those who choose the 9 years or 12 or whatever,
هذا ليس من الإسلام.
this has nothing to do with Islam.
والحجة التي يقولون أن الرسول محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم تزوج عائشة ولها 3 سنوات.
And those who are arguing that Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was 9 years old, because this is their argument,
هذا حديث غير صحيح.
this is a hadith that is weak or wrong hadith.
إسلام البحيري,
Islam al-Bahiri, the Egyptian presenter, TV presenter and scholar of Islam,
قام بدراسة علمية دقيقة
did a very, very strong scientific study
بين فيها
when he was able to prove
أن الرسول تزوج من عائشة ولها 17 سنة.
he got married, the Prophet Muhammad, with Aisha when she was 17 years old and not 9 years old.
وبالتالي زواج الصغيرات هذا من العادات والتقاليد وليس من أصول الإسلام.
And thus, all early marriage are just from the tradition of certain countries, but absolutely has nothing to do with Islam.
Ok, mais merci pour la question. Et La question primordiale qui pousse les filles de ne pas être présentes à l'école ou dans le monde entier, ce n'est pas parce que l'école est très chère.
So the argument that girls cannot afford to go to school is not because it's expensive.
C'est tout simplement la mentalité
It's just about mentality. It's the culture,
de différents leaders religieux
the culture or tradition of certain religious leaders
et qui démontre que une fille, lorsque par exemple, pour pouvoir comprendre cela, on peut essayer de partager la réalité qui se passe au Burundi dans la communauté musulmane.
So to be able really to understand what is going on, let me share with you the reality in what's happening in Burundi.
Moi personnellement, je suis chrétien de l'église de Pentecôte et Ottawa. Je me suis converti à l'islam quand j'avais 16 ans.
I used to be a Christian and I converted to Islam when I was 16 years old.
Je me souviens quand j'étais à la première année à l'université où on est en train de réviser les mathématiques
I
dans la
remember
mosquée.
when I was in the first grade at the university and when we were just studying mathematics and others.
Un cheikh est venu, un responsable de la mosquée, il est venu et nous dit,
Sheikh came to the university and told us,
lorsque vous n'êtes plus du tout en train de lire le Coran, il faut sortir parce que étudier les mathématiques ici c'est prohibé.
he said that there is incompatibility between studying mathematics and religion. So kind of you have to choose between this or that because there is really something, it cannot work together.
Les
What
autres,
the Sheikh said.
bon, il y a aussi pas mal de chers, pas mal de religieux qui disent que le système de l'UNESCO est haram. Lorsqu'on suit le système de l'UNESCO, lorsqu'on apprend l'acquisition des connaissances dans le système de l'UNESCO, c'est prohibé, c'est illicite, et lorsqu'on le suit, on ira directement en enfer.
So they are also saying this, Sheikh, that for whatever reason UNESCO, all what UNESCO is teaching or saying or whatever is haram, it's a sin, and if we follow all what UNESCO is saying about education, right to education and everything, we will go to hell.
C'est un problème sérieux. Lorsque vous irez dans des écoles dites islamiques
It's
entre
really a serious
parenthèses,
issue. If you go to Islamic schools, what we call the Islamic schools in Burundi,
on y trouvera peut-être, lorsque vous y trouverez beaucoup de filles musulmanes, vous y trouverez